is now playing out in a New York courtroom, it may change the debate once again. Now, before you make your judgment, we are going to get a little bit of a background here. I want all the facts available so we can reach our own conclusions. And for that, let's turn to Regina Orsani, who's been following the case.
Well, Rich, a 77-year-old man is now behind bars charged with second-degree murder after killing his ailing wife of over 50 years. Was it an act of mercy, an act of desperation, or murder? It was here at this senior citizen housing complex in New Rochelle, New York, where 77-year-old Paul Weinstein lived with his longtime wife, Helena. And it's also the same place where he killed her. According to police, Weinstein shot his wife, who he says was terminally ill and suffered for years with dementia, inside their 12-story apartment. Moments later, he called 911.
He had said he couldn't care for his wife anymore. She was getting more ill. He promised her that he would never put her in a nursing home or any kind of assisted living like that. She didn't want it, I guess. So he took it upon himself to take her life.
Cops say Weinstein used a German .38 caliber Luger from World War II like this one to shoot his wife. They also say the licensed pharmacist of 55 years was going to turn that gun on himself, but was talked out of it by New Rochelle Police Lieutenant William Childs.
Speaking to Mr. Weinstein, he was very emotional. He would go from almost sobbing to yelling, cursing. He's very upset. He had told me that he shot his wife. He told me his wife had been sick. He's telling me he wanted to kill himself. He got upset. He was saying how he helped people his whole life, and I kind of told me, you're still alive. You still got time to help people again. And kind of broke down. Says, okay, I made up my mind. I'm not going to do it.
Neighbors here at the senior complex describe the Weinsteins as the classic elderly couple, both of them somewhat frail. They say they kept to themselves, but were always together. Him often seen taking care of her as she grew more and more sick.
I used to see them in the laundry room, and then after a while I saw him pushing around in like a little cart or something.
Caregivers are experiencing a tremendous amount of burnout and a tremendous amount of stress. Life as they know it is over.
It's those feelings that May Carpenter, commissioner of the Westchester County Department of Senior Programs, says makes the elderly more susceptible to commit suicide or assisted suicide, more so than any other age group. In fact, she says it's a classic and perhaps preventable tragedy that happens nationally more than 500 times a year. And although each case is different, researchers say there is a typical pattern. The man usually kills the woman in the bedroom with a gun, an act he thought about for weeks, maybe even months. The woman usually has Alzheimer's disease or another illness, and the man is often depressed, exhausted, perhaps even sick himself. The woman is rarely a willing participant, usually killed in her sleep. And the man almost always mistakenly believes he is acting in mercy, putting the woman out of her misery, but instead ending his own misery. In the Weinstein's case, Carpenter feels it was an act of mercy.
Well, I can say under those circumstances, he probably saw it as mercy for his wife and also for himself.
But neighbors of the elderly couple have mixed opinions.
So you don't think it was murder?
It was a moment of, I think, craziness on his part.
So you think that he should face charges?
Oh, definitely.
He's got to be charged with something. He's going to have to do time.
And police say even if it was an act of mercy, the act of taking another person's life is still against the law.
That's always been a question about euthanasia and what's your intention here? Is it, you're still not allowed to take a life, and there are other options.
No one will ever know for sure what really went on between the Weinsteins behind closed doors, or whether this killing was an act of mercy or murder. Paul Weinstein's fate is now in the hands of a grand jury who has a tough decision to make. Rich?
What could Mr. Weinstein be looking at if convicted?
If convicted of second-degree murder, he could face up to 25 years in prison. The commissioner there also told me that he thinks it might be negligent homicide, which could mean a year. Or the grand jury could decide that, maybe it was an act of mercy. This guy felt desperation, and they could just let him off completely. So.
Now, we understood that Ms. Weinstein had a progressive case of dementia, but he or her husband claimed that she also was terminally ill, right?
He did. He says she was terminally ill, but he never talked about what kind of illness she had. He kept saying she has dementia, she has dementia. But as we know, dementia is not an illness that will kill you. So it just seemed from the neighbors that even though he took care of her, they kept to themselves, and it seemed like he was very stressed all the time from that.
Seemed like all those telltale signs that they said typically go along with senior-assisted suicide. It seemed like it was a litany. But it'll also be interesting if this goes to trial, if a jury will look at Mr. Weinstein, and you described him to me, you said a really small, frail old man here.
Very small. I was in the courtroom when they asked for the case to go to a grand jury, and the little man, he walked out, he was so little, about half my size, very, very frail. As you said, he was a pharmacist for 55 years. Everybody in the building is kind of shocked, like, this man is a smart man, why would he do this? And it kind of seemed from reports and from speaking to the neighbors that he just was left with no other alternative. He was going to kill her and then kill himself. It seemed like an agreement between both of them, and then the gun locked. He couldn't kill himself. He called 911. He was crying to police, and they convinced him to turn himself in, that it would be the best thing. So it seemed it's
It'll be interesting because it doesn't seem, certainly as we've described before, as Kevorkian, this is not a coherent, medically involved decision, no matter how people feel about euthanasia. By no means reaches a threshold for assisted suicide like we see in Oregon. But at the same end, if a jury was faced with this, and this is what we're putting to the audience at home, how would you rule and how would you decide? Would you convict a man like Mr. Weinstein, now a widow?
It's really difficult. Even the commissioner of police said that he's not sure if he would even convict him, and that's coming from a police officer. So.
Yeah. All right. Well, that tough decision and tough choice we put to you at home. Now that you've heard the facts of the case, weigh in. Was this an act of compassion, as the husband claims, or murder, as the prosecution asserts? 3-8. RNN Chat is our toll-free number. I want you to weigh in on this. We've all got our opinions, and I want to hear yours. We'll get to those calls. We'll also get to the emails at rnntv.com. Stay with us, everyone. Back right after this break.